When did the I crave attention kid go too far? He was a jerk. I had a couple of pet goats and he would come over and bully them all the time. He'd poke them through the fence with sticks, throw rocks at them, spook them with loud noises, but he'd never go into the pen. He was too scared of them. He should have known better. He was 16. One day, we're all inside and we hear this blood-curdling scream. In comes the kid, screaming at the top of his lungs, "The goat! The goat is after me! Help!" We turn to see the big billy goat staring at him through the sliding glass door. Every once in a while, it'd headbutt the glass. Now, this was a very docile animal. He'd never hurt a fly, but he was out for that boy's blood. It turns out that the kid had been violent towards the goat. He had pinned him up against the wall of the pen, throwing rocks and sticks at its nuts to see if he could hit them. The goat came after him, scaled the fence, and chased him across 3 acres of land and into the house. The kid waited for 2 hours for the goat to go away, but it just never did. Anytime he opened a door to try to sneak away, the goat was right there trying to attack him. Eventually, the goat disappeared and the kid tried to sneak out of a window, feet first, and once again started screaming because the goat was right there, head-butting his backside as he climbed out. It was absolutely liberating. Don't mess with goats. You can run, but you can't hide, even on a tree, because they can climb for some weird reason. Story 2. Went to school with a girl who faked 3 pregnancies. The best one, I guess the best one, was when she was showing everyone a picture of an ultrasound that had the URL on it still, and was saying her mom was going to say the baby was hers so the girl wouldn't have to deal with everyone knowing and could finish high school. She also had this thing in middle school and high school where she'd constantly ask out the only openly gay guys in school, and if they rejected her, she'd threaten to end herself. She told the whole school that some dude got her pregnant with twins and that she had a termination. She printed pictures of ultrasounds off the internet and put balloons on his locker on the twins' birthday. Another girl also claimed in class once that she was violated and then got pregnant and the guy forced her to have a termination against her will. Like, took her to the hospital screaming no and had the doctors knock her out and do it without consent. Yeah, no honey, that's not how it works. And I don't know about the being violated part, but based on how calmly and outright she told the story, I really doubt it was true at all. Story 3. A girl once punched herself in the gut at her little brother's birthday party and threw up just so people would notice her. She was 24. Now that's what you call commitment, I guess. Story 4. My little brother is a few years younger than me. He used to come into my room to me all the time, and my parents never allowed me to have a lock. He was around 10 years old when I started propping a piano stand under my doorknob to keep people out. I'm so sick of people saying it was a fire hazard. You'd use whatever you could too if your parents never knocked and your brother used to shoot you with airsoft guns. So little brother pushed the door and the piano stand was at the knob. I ignored it before all I heard was the loudest bang followed by a thud. I opened the door to see him lying on the floor, holding his face and crying. Apparently, he decided that he could break down my door like in the movies by throwing himself against it after running down from the hall. But this idiot didn't just throw his shoulder or kick it, he threw his entire body against it like a squirrel going for a tree. Arms and legs out, face first. I got blamed for it, but it was worth it. Only time I ever laughed that hard at his expense again was when he tried to fart into my room and himself about 2 years later. Another time we were fighting in the hallway. He was like 13 or 14 by this point. He backed up and ran at me. I don't know what my thought process was back then, but I raised my foot and he rammed his face right into it. He basically did a Charlie Brown. His legs flew upwards and he hit the ground on his back as his nose started bleeding. We spent a solid minute just staring at each other in shock before he even realized what happened. Story 5. Faked her own abduction as a quote-unquote senior prank, even got the attention of Amber Alert. For context, here is my recollection of the events. Well, this is from my freshman year of high school, was told by a relative who was a senior at the time, and that was a while ago, so some parts may be a little bit fuzzy, but here we go. So that year, many of the senior pranks were the usual generic things, toilet paper, the works. So this girl had this great idea for a prank and to be a standout, faking her own abduction. Shortly after school one day in late May, she called and texted her parents and friends that were out of the loop, hysterically telling them that a stranger shoved her in a truck and drove off. She said she was scared and please help her. The parents and friends wasted no time and immediately notified police. Eventually, the Amber Alert was issued too. She was later tracked down and found that evening. Turns out she was at the next city over hanging out at her boyfriend's house. She confessed and was promptly arrested. The following day, it was discussed primarily by the upperclassmen and didn't make it to the freshman class until sixth period 2 days later. I had another quote-unquote friend do something kind of similar when I was a teenager. He pretended to be a relative and told everyone that he died in a horrific way. I'll spare the details, just know that he didn't spare any, and the images he drew up with his words still haunt me. Then claimed he'd survived in a medically induced coma. He faked an entire stalker cousin and the death of his parents. He would often tell me he wanted to hurt himself or wanted to die, and I would spend hours talking him down. He pretended to be a neighbor that was helping him out, and my dumb brain believed all of it until he finally made a threat to himself that I couldn't talk him out of, so I called the police and gave them his phone number, and he freaked out when they showed up. That was when I finally managed to pry it out of him that it was all lies. Story 6. In the vein of online friends, I once started being really active in a small forum about an online game, probably over 10 years ago. The guy in charge of it had a kind of inside connection with the developers. I'm not sure if he had some side work with him or just knew somebody inside, but it was a big deal because it was a Japanese game and nobody else really knew much about the creator. Over time, I ended up going back and forth with people on the forums and hanging out with them on Chat Tango, and because I was friends with that guy in charge, I ended up rising through the ranks of mods and admins till I was second from the top, probably in part because of my friendship with the head dude. He would always give a little tease about knowing what the next update was going to be, but he wasn't allowed to tell us, or having talked with the dev through a translator and told him some of our problems or suggestions about the game. This went on for at least a year, maybe 2. We even traded phone numbers and called and talked about our lives, which was a big deal in the never tell anyone anything online about yourself era. Sometime later on, I log on to find out it's all falling apart and my quote-unquote friend had been lying to us for years. He had zero connection to the dev or anything like that. He had just been the one that stuck around when the forum died out, got the previous person to give him control before they left, and hung on to that power during the rebirth of the forum, fueled by a handful of really active users like me. It all sounds super petty by now, but to 14, 16-year-old me, it was a big deal. That forum was a significant part of my life. I was even trying to learn some basic coding to help out and change things on the back end, and that dude was the closest online friend I've ever had. And then it turns out that the entire friendship had been built on lies told to make him seem more important or get him more attention. Story 7. So I knew this girl in high school who was a queen of obnoxious and attention-seeking behavior. She was constantly trying to get people's attention, from screaming loudly in the hall to crying hard over some sad memes at lunch. She was so annoying, but unfortunately many people bought and fed into her histrionics. Let's call her Cryface. Now, I never really liked Cryface. She came off as fake and kind of rude. I tried to ignore her for the most part, but the absolute turning point for me was her over-the-top behavior at a choir concert junior year. It was 20 minutes before the concert was set to begin, and all the kids were practicing getting on the risers, about 100 people or so. Suddenly, Cryface's mom entered the auditorium, briskly walked to the director and whispered something in his ear. The director nodded and called Cryface off the riser. When Cryface got down, the mom whispered something to her. All of a sudden, Cryface let out a blood-curdling scream and ran for the auditorium exit. She got halfway before collapsing to the ground wailing. She kept yelling, oh my God," over and over and over again. The mom came up behind her, pulled her up by the elbow, and rushed her out. Naturally, everyone in the choir thought something horrible had happened. Some friends had texted her, but Cryface would only respond with cryptic messages like, "Nothing will ever be the same," and "Why couldn't it have been me?" Rumors spread that her father and her little sister had passed away in a fire due to a car wreck. With a reaction like that, what else could it be? And people were talking about organizing a carpool to attend the funeral and taking friendship shifts, so someone would always be available to comfort her. I even agreed to a couple of shifts. Hell, the entire choir said a group prayer for her before the concert, and this was at a public school. We were all so worried. Now, these thoughts would have been incredibly kind if that was what happened, but nope. Turns out Cryface's little sister was diagnosed with diabetes. The sister didn't go to the hospital, she didn't get sick and needed medical attention. The family had only received the call that the scheduled medical tests came back positive for diabetes. The mom came to tell Cryface because the family had decided to skip the choir concert so they could meet with the doctor and talk about the medical diagnosis. WTF? Seriously? Like, the things people say for attention is crazy. Another thing I'm gonna have a crying face to because 87% of my viewers haven't subscribed yet. So how about you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, then the only thing positive you'll get is my awesome videos. Thanks for watching. Story 8. My ex-roommate did a whole lot of stupid crap for attention. She constantly posted things on social media like, the world would be better off without me, nobody wants me alive, etc., etc. But she always refused to get actual help. When her boyfriend broke up with her, she went around telling everyone that she broke up with him after he had her. She always bragged to people she had just met about how many guys she had been with, how much she loved grass and booze, etc. She got engaged to her Tinder FWB she had only known for a few months, and she made me homeless because her engagement was supposed to be a secret from her parents. They found out and she blamed me, so she made a whole bunch of crap about me emotionally her, even though that's what she was doing to me the entire time I lived with her, so that way her parents would kick me out. They owned the loft we were staying in. I haven't spoken to her since I was kicked out, but from what I hear from other people, the psycho witch is going nowhere in life. She got kicked out of her first choice university, dropped out of community college after failing all of her classes her first semester, and has been stuck as a cashier at a crappy grocery store for the past 2 years. Oh, and her Tinder FWB broke the engagement with her right after I was made homeless. Guess he finally got a brain and realized that she was frickin' insane. Story 9. I used to work at a boys and girls club. There was one particular girl who was around 7 or 8. She came in one day with a bruise, told the lady at the counter that her mom was violent towards her. CPS and cops are called. Determined that no, mom did not hurt her. In fact, mom was very freaked out and worried about it. A couple of days later, the girl runs up to me and another worker with a busted lip and blackish eye. Fresh. She told us that another kid beat her up. We go to look at the cameras. I kid you not, this girl tells the other kid that he or she, I can't remember which, was going to get into a big trouble for refusing to play with her. She proceeds to run into the wall several times, and when that didn't do much, she takes a broom handle. Then, once she has a black eye, she bites her lip to make it bleed. Then she runs out to tell on said kid. I don't know what happened next as I was scheduled to do my lifeguarding duty. But last I heard, she hasn't come back. I sure hope she was put in a mental ward or whatever. Kid was psycho. My ex's best friend, every time he was rejected by a girl, a guy I knew used to either 1. Have a fake medical emergency, or 2. Send out a mass text saying he was about to end himself. An example of the first case, a girl he was with for a grand total of 48 hours dumped him for having a hand-drawn anime adult collection. She dumped him at an In-N-Out in front of all of us. He went out to his car first, and as we followed shortly after, we see his legs hanging out of his open car door, violently convulsing. Mid-seizure, he stopped and asked this girl to go to the hospital with him. She declined, rather nonplussed, and left. He kept it for a few minutes after that, but made a speedy recovery once he realized she wasn't coming back. As for the second case, and the instance where he really went all out, there was a girl he was in love with for a few weeks, but hopelessly out of his league. He asked her out and she said no. Our circle of friends got the mass text saying that he was at the Riverwalk Bridge ready to jump. In the past, we'd find him after an hour or 2 at the local pizza joint or hiding out at his mom's, but we raced down there nonetheless. We show up at the bridge and notice his glasses sitting on the handrail. I peer over the side and see this dude's Flavor Town shirt. He always wore this black button-up with flames on the bottom discarded on the sidewalk. This is starting to seem pretty serious, so we call the cops, his mom, etc. And about 20 minutes later, we find him shirtless, laying half in the water E.T. style and pretending to be drowned. We had trouble, quote-unquote, reviving him. He was quite clearly breathing, but he suddenly regained consciousness after one of the cops gave him a sternum rub. We stopped hanging out around him after that. Well, there's that way of bringing someone back, quote-unquote, reviving them with the classic cop sternum rub. If it works, and it's funny as hell, especially when it isn't happening to you. Story 10. She sent pictures of cuts to other students via Snapchat with no warning. When the kids responded, she left them hanging. The school and her parents obviously got involved, and she was called to the office first thing in the morning the next day. I later found out she sent them because she was, quote, curious as to what people would say to her if she did that to herself, unquote. The cuts, well, they weren't deep, just deep enough to draw a small bit of blood. They healed in a month or so and didn't even scar, but it did freak people out. This girl never really apologized or showed any kind of remorse for what she did. She was almost kind of proud of the fact that people tried to contact her or help her. Kids called her house phone to speak to her parents. Needless to say, most people still haven't forgiven her. Story 11. My old friend, online, he used to say he was depressed and had bad thoughts and did hurt himself a lot. Everyone thought they were real. At first, I did too, until I was looking up fake cuts on YouTube for Halloween and saw a cut that looked almost exactly like his, went back on Discord to look at the picture of the cut, and there I saw the pen ink and confronted him. But apparently he was rushed to an emergency room from that same cut and was put on quote-unquote watch for 24 hours but had his phone the entire time and couldn't take pictures of proof. In the end, a few weeks later, we were in a Discord server and I joined the public call there, and there he was. Yeah, a few weeks ago I lied to my old friend saying I got some cut and was in the emergency room. We talk daily still, like real friends and not old friends. Then I said, oh really? Well then, we're not talking anymore then, and he tried apologizing and saying he lied to us then, but I was done with his crap. I blocked him and never talked to him again, and this was around, December 2018? A few people keep asking for his name. All information I'll put out about him is, I'm 75% sure his name was Angel. Story 12. One day when I was in middle school, there was this kid, let's call him Joey. Joey is an attention-seeking loon that can't spend a minute without opening his mouth. He would always try to talk about other people, saying that he wants to fight them, but when they actually try to fight him, he backs down. He always disrupts the class by yelling out his Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And Joey and I were in the same band class. It was one of those classes where two instrument groups would be paired. Yes, I was in the 6th grade beginners band, and he played the clarinet and I played the trumpet. One day in band, we had to go one by one to do a full front and back page song paired with the opposing instrument. So my band director paired me up with Joey. Oh, Joey. We had to play the piece together, and he played all of the wrong notes while I was doing all right. When we got to the 74th measure, the director stopped us and told Joey to stop playing and told me to keep playing. As I played through the piece, Joey was red as a tomato. Then I made it to the 60th measure, and he started to make grunting sounds. The grunting turned into tapping his foot, the foot tapping turned to stomping. I noticed it and everyone was looking at him in a what the F face. I stopped playing and he just picked his clarinet up and started to play random notes. Then when everyone was telling him to stop and the director took his piece away, he just turned twice as red. Then, I kid you not, he just threw his clarinet at me full throttle. Fortunately, it didn't hit me, but it did hit a girl sitting behind me. I went to go check on her because it hit her pretty hard. If you held a clarinet before, it's sort of heavy. My director just grabbed him and took him to the principal's office. The girl's nose was bleeding badly and we went to get napkins. Later on in the day, we heard from a friend that he was suspended for 2 weeks for that and disrupting the class many times. Today, he's dropped out of high school to become a rapper. I checked his SoundCloud and his YouTube and they aren't doing so good. I hope he has a secondary job so he won't spend his whole life trying to rap. From playing the clarinet to throwing the clarinet to rapping? I guess, fair enough. It's crazy what people do for attention, eh? Hope it didn't rile you up too much, but I hope you enjoyed the video so far, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you're also going to enjoy what's the most pathetic thing someone did for attention. Story number 4 is cringy and awkward as hell. I'll see you in that video.